Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. I'm back from a riveting weekend at the Charlotte YCS, and while I didn't walk away with a sterling record, I'm pretty happy with how I piloted, as well as having the chance to play some big paper Yu-Gi-Oh! And meeting some of you. And so, I've returned home, and I'm going to enjoy a nice, relaxing week of writing about another freaking trap deck. Come on! So, Tactical Masters has so far released a pendulum theme that emulates some kind of board game video game, and a Skyrim ripoff that's tied in with generator lore. And now they've rounded out the roster with an excuse for me to make as many David Bowie and Jim Henson references as I can get my grubby little hands on. Labrynth, as opposed to Labyrinth to keep from crossing over with all the existing Labrynth cards, promises to bolster the playstyle Altergeist and Layer Pilots have been plaguing me with for years now, interrupting turns with powerful individual trap cards and squeezing as much extra value out of them as possible. So let's approach the foyer to observe the decor, examine these death traps mechanics to see how they all fit together, then see what fiendish friends can facilitate our fatal facility. It's time to dance, magic dance, with Labrynth. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our duel runners. Our next stop is 30k, where we'll have Jack Atlas Explained, which includes Resonators, Red Dragon Archfiend, and whatever other cards were used by the Master of Foster. We've also got our Discord, where we've breached the archives of eldritch knowledge that tells us what can and cannot be done with tokens. I'm also on Twitch, where you can join me for viewer duels and progression pools, and don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which explained videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Labrynth? Well, they're a series of Dark Fiend monsters and their associated trap cards that revolve around the usage of normal trap cards that remove monsters from the board. This is meant to emulate death traps in dungeons getting rid of adventurers. This means that, while Infinite Impermanence isn't going to be quite as effective with us, it doesn't check to see how the normal trap removed those monsters, so cards from Bottomless Trap Hole to Compulsory Evacuation Device to Mirror Force are all on the table. And speaking of tables, let's start with the theme's furniture, because it wouldn't be a spooky castle without some enchanted finery. Labrynth Clock is a level 1 monster with 0 attack and defense, and as a quick effect you can discard this card, and during that turn, while you control a Labrynth monster, you can activate one normal trap card the turn it was set. And if you send any number of cards from your hand to the grave to activate a normal trap card, or a Labrynth monster's effect, except a copy of Clock, while this card is in the grave, except during the damage step, you can either add this card to your hand, or special summon it. Woo, that's a mouthful. Essentially, if you discard a card for the cost of something like Phoenix Wing Windblast or Karma Cut, Clock can jump onto the field as material for something else, or into your hand to stock up for your next discard, or can be discarded for its own Makiura the Destructor type effect. And remember, this doesn't just help recoup the costs of your normal traps, but your Labrynth monsters as well. It's a valuable addition to the lineup, ensuring that, while playing this deck, you'll have a great time. Labrynth Stovey is a level 2 monster with 0 attack and 2000 defense, and as a quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the grave and discard a card to set a Labrynth spell or trap directly from your hand or deck. And if any number of monsters leaves the field because of your normal trap's effect while this card is in your grave, you can special summon this card from your grave. So you're not getting back discard fodder, but you are getting a nice 2000 defense blocker that can be cashed in again along with a discard to get another Labrynth spell or trap card to make sure you've always got something cooking. Labrynth Chandra is a level 3 monster with 1500 attack and 0 defense, and actually works a lot like Stovey. As a quick effect, you can send them from your hand or field to the grave, as well as discarding a card, to set a Labrynth spell or trap from your hand or deck. But this time, when removing a monster from your opponent's field with a normal trap's effect, Chandra returns from the grave to your hand instead of being special summoned. So if you do use something like Phoenix Wing or Karma Cut, you can get back both Clock and Chandra to ensure you have a full grip of cards to feed into your effects. And if you use cards that don't discard, like Trap Holes or Compulsory Evacuation Devices, then that's just a solid +1. And if I'm not mistaken, that looks like a level 3 Dark Fiend, so forget Labrynth, it's time to start jamming this into the trap card focused variant of Burning Abyss. Though, I've gotta say, It's kind of odd they stuck this card in the Dark Fiend archetype. I figured the first Magic the Gathering crossover would be a bit more accurate, like, could they not have made Chandra at least a fire attribute? Labrynth Servant Ariana is a level 4 monster with 1600 attack and 2100 defense, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Labrynth card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of itself. And if any number of monsters leaves the field because of your normal trap card's effect, you can draw a card, then either special summon a fiend monster from your hand, or set a spell or trap card from your hand to the field. But you can only use one of their effects per turn, and only once per turn. But that's not too bad, as you'll usually be summoning Ariana on your turn, and you'll be triggering the trap card effect on your opponents. It does mean you can't summon an Ariana with the second effect to trigger the first effect, but the fact that you can summon any fiend gives you some pretty outstanding options, both within and without the theme. Belial, Marquis of Darkness, keeps all your other face-up monsters from being targeted by attacks or spell or trap effects, which is kinda wild. Visor Shock can be a surprise giant Trunade, or summon Diabound Colonel as quick effect attack reduction. A repeatable 1800 to 2400 attack reduction is nothing to sneeze at. But before we start inviting guests over, we have got to get that maid outfit tailored. Who did they think was gonna need sleeves that long? Labrynth Servant Ariane is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and 1100 defense, and they can send a normal trap card from your hand or that set on your field to the grave to special summon a level 4 or lower fiend monster from your deck in defense position. And like Ariana, if a monster leaves the field because of your normal trap card's effect, Ariane draws you a card, at which point you can either special summon a fiend monster from your hand or set any spell or trap card from your hand to the field. And these effects aren't mutually exclusive, so you could end up using both in one turn. So not only can you special summon all previously mentioned Labrynth monsters, you can also summon something like Archfiend Eccentric as monster removal, Absolute King Backjack for its amazing trap card synergies, or summon Holding Arms to blank a monster, negating its effects and keeping it from attacking. But they have got to stop playing with the light fixtures. The candlesticks aren't lances, Ariane. I don't care if we don't actually need them for lighting because all the demons that visit have dark vision, it's about the aesthetics. Labrynth Archfiend is a level 7 monster with 2000 attack and 2800 defense, and gains 400 attack for each normal trap with a different name in your grave, so they can get pretty big pretty quick. Monsters your opponent controls can't target fiend monsters you control for attacks, except Labrynth Archfiend, and if a trap card is activated, except during the damage step, regardless of who activates it, you can special summon this card from your hand, which helps alleviate the burden from the other servants so they can special summon other fiends, though you can still choose to do so if Labrynth Archfiend is the card you drew off of their effects. And if this card is special summoned, you can set a normal trap card directly from your deck, so long as it only triggers when an attack is declared. Wall of Disruption and Magic Cylinder are legal targets, but since you want to maximize your normal traps that are actually removal, Dimensional Prison and Mirror Force are going to be stronger options. It's a shame that you'll be telegraphing that you have a card with that kind of trigger, but we've got something a little later on that can help with that. And if your opponent thinks they can attack into you before this set card becomes live, Ku Klok can catch them off guard, so they're the ones left feeling so attacked right now. Labrynth of the Silver Castle is our big boss, a level 8 monster with 2900 attack and 1900 defense, and while they're on the field, your opponent cannot activate monster effects in response to the activation of your normal trap cards. This means no activation negations from monsters like Borreload Savage Dragon, or trying to dodge banishing removal with DPE. However, this only stops responses to normal trap card activations, not normal trap effect activations, so any grave effects are still fair game. They can also target a normal trap card in your grave and set it, but it can't be activated unless you control a fiend monster. And if a monster leaves the field because of the effect of your normal trap card, except during the damage step, you can destroy a card your opponent controls or one random card in their hand. This doesn't target, bypassing any protection from that, and since it's a monster effect, it can bypass anything that randomly protects against traps, so you're not stuck with an arsenal of useless back row. Unlike Archfiend, Silver Castle here can't special summon themselves, so the servants are going to be very helpful in fielding this matron. And I've gotta say, even a situational magical meltdown effect is pretty good if the situation you're fighting against is monster effects. Maybe if we get to a point where the game isn't completely saturated in monster effects, then maybe this effect won't be as good. But until then, Silver Castle is taking home a bit more than a silver medal. Alright, that's all of our monsters, now it's time for the spells and traps, and yes, strangely enough, our trap-focused archetype does have some spells. First is Labrynth Setting, a quick play spell that targets 2 of your Labrynth spell and or trap cards that are banished or in your grave, except a copy of itself. Shuffles them into the deck, then if you control a fiend monster, you can set non-Labrynth normal trap cards with different names directly from your deck equal to the number of cards shuffled. So without a fiend it just recycles your cards, but with a fiend it's at worst a 1-for-1 trade, going up to +1 that grabs you any off-theme normal trap card, which is kinda wild. Previously unsearchable traps are now super searchable, and since there's no other restriction, it almost doesn't matter that your opponent knows what you set if those trap cards are proactive enough. But make sure to take care to select the right trap cards during deck building. It's important to make sure all your settings are in order. Labrynth is a field spell that was presumably made to dissuade you from playing Layer of Darkness. If you activate a non-Labrynth normal trap card, except during the damage step, you can special summon a fiend monster from your hand or grave. And if you activate a set Welcome Labrynth normal trap card, you can add this additional effect when it resolves. Destroy 1 card on the field. We've got 2 such normal traps we'll get into in a bit, but for now, it's good to know that, on top of everything else they do, they also gain some non-targeting destruction removal. It also helps mobilize and reborn our fiends for playing off-theme normal traps, which is kinda cool. It's an amazing card featuring some truly impressive architecture. You'd be forgiven for forgetting that this place is actually filled to the brim with horrible death traps. In fact, now it's time to take a look at a few of them, starting with Welcome Labrynth, a normal trap that special summons a Labrynth monster from your deck, but you cannot special summon non-fiend monsters from your deck or extra deck until the end of your next turn, and if any number of monsters leaves the field because of your normal trap effects while this card is in your grave, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can set this card. Basically, anytime your normal trap cards sweep away a monster, you're about to get buku's amount of value. Draws, putting cards back in your hand, resetting trap cards that get you into big monsters, it's incredible. And being locked out of everything but fiends means next to nothing because Live Evil Twins and Unchained exist. I've gotta say, this theme is doing pretty welcome for itself. Fair Welcome Labrynth is a normal trap that you can activate when your opponent declares an attack while you control a fiend monster. It targets a card on the field, negates the attack, and if you do, destroy the target, then you can set a non-Labrynth normal trap card directly from your hand or deck to the field. This is the silliest Sakuretsu armor I've ever seen. It stops attacks, pops any card, and gets you to another normal trap on top of replacing itself. And it's one of the best cards you can place with Labrynth Archfiend, as it triggers on attacks, not your opponent's attacks, meaning you can force the activation yourself and not have to worry about your opponent needing to run into it. And if Labrynth is on the board, you get another pop on top of that. And honestly, I'm in love with the art here. The knight just looks so bored. I know Dogmatica has the better Dark Souls aesthetic, but this card has the Dark Souls feel of someone clearing out the same room for the n-teenth time, trying to get back to the boss. And I know this from experience. Up yours, Vort! Labrynth Barrage is a normal trap that can be activated when you activate a set normal trap card, except Labrynth Barrage, and on resolution, this card's effect becomes that normal trap card's effect when that card is activated. Also, your opponent takes no damage from your card effects until the end of their next turn after this resolves, and thank goodness for it. Otherwise, we'd be seeing secret barrel combos all over the place. Also note that this can miss timing like Thunder Dragon Titan can. If you activate a set normal trap card, and your opponent has a response to that, then you can't activate Barrage, which is why it's so sweet to have Silver Castle on board, as it'll keep your opponent's monster from causing that kind of issue. This works especially well with trap cards that require a cost, because with Barrage, you don't have to pay it, so you get double the value. Twin casting Karma Cut is pretty sweet, to say nothing of the value you could potentially accrue if you copy Accumulated Fortune. It's just a shame it involves having to deploy all these traps at once, because they are a pain to reset. Have you tried to put a Spike Pit trap back in place? It's not fun! Our last card isn't a Labrynth one, but it is being released alongside them and has appropriate art. Not to mention the effect is very much in line with what we want to accomplish. Archfiend Glitch is a normal trap that you can activate if you control a fiend monster. You target a card on the field, destroy it, then you can send a fiend monster from your deck to the grave. So it's like a more board impacting Fiend Griefing. And because it's not a Labrynth card, it has great synergy with Labrynth, as it triggers the Fiend Summoning effect. And look, Glitch even has you sending a Fiend from your deck to the grave, ain't that something? On theme, this is a fantastic way to clear threats, trigger a lot of your monster's effects, and set up your grave. And in other Fiend decks, it does just about all that minus triggering Labrynth effects, which isn't really a big deal. In fact, I'm kind of wondering if there was a glitch at Konami R&D, because this card seems a little too good. I mean, there's no hard once per turn on this card, what's up with that? Okay, so that's all the Labrynth cards, but what do we do with them? Well, we're running out the control strats, folks. We'll be picking off our opponent's monsters with our normal traps, all while racking up enormous card advantage, closing out the game fairly quickly with big monsters like Silver Castle and Archfiend. But what can we play to help them out? As far as Fiends go, we've got a huge pile to work with. The Nightmares are all fantastic extra deck monsters for us to go into if we need to deal with removal, and Griffin can even reset our spells and traps. Unchained not only thrives when cards are destroyed, but they also have some pretty sweet normal traps for us to copy, and while we can potentially run into some conflicts with the live twins, as long as we get the evil twin loop established as soon as possible, it won't matter. But you don't have to be a fiend to work well with Labrynth. One theme that loves its trap cards is made up almost entirely of them, Paleozoics. While Welcome Labrynth will lock you out of the extra deck monsters, Dinomicious is still an excellent piece of removal, though it won't trigger Coup Clock because the discard is part of the effect. But you do gain access to a wealth of powerful utility effects, and while you're waiting for the Welcome Labrynth restriction to wear off, why not summon Onibimaru's Soul Sweeper to make sure the Paleos don't get banished? It's got decent stats, has a very strong Farfa effect, and can potentially recycle banished monsters. Amazement also has a bounty of normal trap cards that you can play with Arlecchino having the same summon effect as Archfiend. And while it isn't normal trap removal, the big top big shot here can cash in a ton of Amazement trap cards from your grave to clear the board for the rest of your cards to run rampant. Trap Tricks are there to search you probably one of the most iconic sets of normal trap cards, the Hole cards. And if, for some reason, you set a normal trap card from your grave to the field with Silver Castle's effect, then lost all your fiends, well then Mantis can bump it back to your hand so you can reset it to use it without that restriction. And there are still so many normal traps we haven't even touched on that are worth mentioning. Ice Dragon's Prison, for instance, is a wonderfully flexible card already that puts in even more work in Labrynth. Torrential Tribute is a scary board wipe that can easily put you ahead in the game, and if you want something a bit more targeted, Dogmatica Punishment can blast a monster and get you a grave effect depending on what you send. This also means you can include the Dogmatica Ecclesia and Fleur engine, as your extra deck isn't super important here. As for a silly tech pick, I'm going with Interdimensional Matter Transporter. Something you might have noticed is that a lot of our cards trigger when a normal trap card removes a monster from the field, but it doesn't specify that it has to be our opponent's monsters. Matter Transporter can keep our monsters safe from interaction while triggering those effects. And since you can recycle it with Silver Castle, you'll have a way to pull this off every turn. And that's all I have to say about Labrynth. Will this archetype be meta? Yeah, I think it's got a pretty good shot. While they're few and far between, trap card focused decks tend to combat the meta in ways it's usually ill-prepared to deal with. But in contrast to, say, Altergeist, which has a very strong, almost oppressive control game, but takes several turns to close things out, Labrynth trades out some of that control power for very strong monsters that give your opponent less time to get back on their feet. And considering how explosive many decks can be, it's hard to argue with the trade-off. But all of that isn't going to mean much until I find a way out of this blasted Labrynth. At least the Wi-Fi is good, though. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Do you think Labrynth is a box office hit, or does it just miss the timing? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Adam Zajdel, Nebula Navigators, Ava Gorley, Ashling Waltz, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Conair, The Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Serb, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem-T Bright and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing these thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to see another video that's got a real hankering for trap cards, check out this video I did covering Dinomorphia. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series, Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.